Eleanor Carter never imagined her life would spiral into a whirlwind of heartbreak, betrayal, and unspeakable survival. One fateful night, cast out on the cold, unforgiving streets, she found herself giving birth in an empty alley with no help in sight. Her millionaire ex-partner, Adrian Davenport, was nowhere to be found. Yet destiny had other plans. Months later they would come face to face again, but this time under the glaring lights of a courtroom, with the relentless echo of a judge's gavel thundering in the background. Prepare for an unforgettable journey entwined with secrets, scandals, and a relentless quest for justice that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Elena Carter had grown accustomed to the noises of the city, the taxi horns, distant sirens, and the electric hum of street lamps. But on this particular night, every sound felt amplified. The cold seeped through her tattered coat, chilling her to the bone. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her swollen belly. She stumbled through the dark alley, breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, searching for any sign of help. Her mind raced with a single, frantic question. Where is Adrian? He had promised to be there for her, to protect her and their unborn child. But as her due date approached, the phone calls stopped and the texts never came. The man who once swore his undying love vanished without a trace. At first, Elena believed he was busy handling the affairs of Davenport Holdings. Adrian was, after all, the youngest heir to a formidable business empire. He spent his days attending endless meetings at the family firm's head office in Chicago's Loop, dining with politicians and rubbing shoulders at exclusive galas. She brushed aside her doubts, clinging to the idea that once his work settled, he would return to her side. But here she was alone in labor and desperately hoping for a miracle. The contraction hit her with brutal force. Elena collapsed against a graffiti-covered wall, gritting her teeth so hard she feared they might crack. She had no phone. She had no one to call. She'd pawned her last valuable possession, her mother's locket, just to afford a few nights at a run-down motel. But now even that was gone. She looked up and down the deserted alley, praying someone might pass by. Her pleas were swallowed by the roar of an approaching train overhead. In that suffocating moment, Eleanor realized she would have to deliver her baby by herself. Panic seized her heart, but a fierce maternal instinct also flooded her veins. She forced herself to breathe, to remember the techniques she'd read about months ago. As another contraction racked her body, Eleanor screamed into the darkness. She felt the baby descending, a sensation both terrifying and miraculous. She removed her coat, spreading it on the cold, damp pavement. The city's neon glow illuminated the graffiti around her, and she felt for a fleeting second that this heart-breakingly surreal scene might be the end of her. But she pushed forward, determined to bring her child into the world, no matter the cost. A sudden wave of relief swept over Elena when she heard a faint voice from the mouth of the alley. An elderly man who introduced himself as Mr. Harold James, wearing a threadbare trench coat, had heard her cries. Under normal circumstances, he might have hurried on, fearful of city dangers, but something compelled him to step forward. Crouching beside Elena, he offered nothing more than a few words of encouragement, and trembling hands he admitted he knew next to nothing about childbirth. But in that moment, compassion was all Eleanor needed. With Harold's help, she tore open the hem of her dress to fashion makeshift swaddling cloths. Every nerve in her body felt aflame. She let out a raw, guttural scream. And then finally a new voice joined the piercing cry of her newborn daughter. Elena cradled the tiny infant against her chest, tears mingling with the sweat on her face. Harold rummaged through his pockets, eventually producing a clean handkerchief to gently wipe the baby's face. In the faint glow of a flickering streetlight, Eleanor cast at her child a rush of love, overwhelming the pain and desperation. She whispered a single name: Hope. In the days that followed, Eleanor's world was a fragile balancing act between survival and caring for her newborn. Mr. James, true to his unassuming kindness, led Elena to a makeshift shelter hidden beneath the overpass. The shelter, run by a small non-profit, offered warmth and anonymity. Two things she desperately needed. She tried to contact Adrian, but the line she had for him was constantly busy or disconnected. When she called Davenport Holdings, she was met with polite yet dismissive secretaries who claimed they had never heard of her. During those sleepless nights while cradling hope close, Eleanor wondered what she had done to deserve such abandonment. And yet she clung to a slender thread of optimism. Adrian was a man of ambition, recognized as a wunderkind in the financial world, a graduate of Harvard Business School, a subject of numerous articles in Forbes and The Guardian. He was adored by the public for his philanthropic endeavors and charm. Elena reasoned that the man she knew, gentle caring, couldn't have simply disappeared on purpose. But as she discovered an outdated newspaper article featuring Adrian at the Ritz-Carlton Gala with another woman on his arm, her doubts exploded into heartbreak. Had he truly replaced her? Or was there something deeper at play? The shelter manager, Teresa Alvarez, took pity on Elena's plight. She reached out to local charities, including one run by the city's Department of Human Services, in hopes of securing more permanent assistance for Elena and her newborn. The endless forms and administrative hoops felt like navigating a labyrinth. But Elena's determination never wavered. Between feedings, Elena poured every ounce of energy she had into finding work. Most potential employers turned her away the moment they saw her baby in tow. A sympathetic waitress position offered by a local diner was short-lived when Hope developed colic, and Elena's frequent absences to soothe her daughter resulted in abrupt termination. At night, Eleanor often found herself awake, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic, reliving the sweet memories with Adrian. She remembered the penthouse parties at the Drake Hotel, the spontaneous weekend trips to Napa Valley, and the times he used to whisper promises of a life filled with love and security. How could that same man leave her to fend for herself in the cold streets of Chicago? Desperation fueled her. She wrote letters addressed directly to Adrian's personal penthouse, even slipping one under the doors of Davenport Holdings. Silence remained her only reply. Behind the walls of Davenport Holdings, Adrian's world was equally tumultuous, though in a very different way. After his father's sudden passing from a heart attack, Adrian found himself in the crosshairs of board members, executives, and opportunistic relatives who all questioned whether he had the mettle to steer the Davenport empire. He spent long nights buried in financial reports, ironically unaware that just a few miles away, Eleanor was fighting to keep their newborn daughter fed and warm. Whenever thoughts of Elena surfaced, her radiant smile, her unwavering belief in him, he tried to dismiss them. The memory of their argument, the hurt on her face as he walked out the door, weighed heavily on him. Yet he convinced himself he was doing the right thing by focusing on the business. Meanwhile, Adrian's best friend and personal attorney, Mark Henderson, cautioned him repeatedly. "If Eleanor is pregnant, you need to address it," Mark insisted. Ignoring the possibility could lead to legal trouble down the road. But Adrian, grappling with his own insecurities and illusions of betrayal, brushed aside his friend's concerns. With the entire Davenport board pressuring him to secure a profitable merger, Adrian allowed his personal life to remain an unresolved mystery. Winter arrived mercilessly in Chicago, the sub-zero winds cutting across Lake Michigan and leaving ice crystals in their wake. For Elena and her baby, warmth was a luxury they could seldom afford. Through the non-profit's coordination, they secured a small room in a halfway house. The cramped space, flaking walls and drafty windows were far from ideal, but Elena found a glimmer of hope in having a door to lock at night. Every morning she dressed Hope in layers of donated clothes before braving the frigid streets to search for work. She handed out resumes at fast food chains, retail stores, and even administrative offices. Most places either ignored her or expressed sympathy before showing her the door. "We'll keep your application on file," they'd say, their eyes betraying a pity she loathed. One fateful day, after trudging through a blizzard, Eleanor collapsed on the sidewalk, her body shaking from exhaustion. A passerby named Patricia Locke, an off-duty social worker, found her and immediately called an ambulance. At Mount Sinai Hospital, doctors discovered severe anemia, dehydration, and signs of malnourishment. For Elena, the hospital bed and the gentle hum of machines offered a fleeting sense of safety, even if Hope's cries in the nursery reminded her that they still had an uphill battle to fight. While Elena recovered at Mount Sinai, Patricia Locke, the caring social worker who found her, visited every day. She brought small comforts, a cozy blanket for Hope, a set of baby bottles, and offered a compassionate ear. It was Patricia who first gently suggested legal counsel. "Eleanor," Patricia said one afternoon, "you have rights, and so does your daughter. If Adrian Davenport is truly the father, you need to consider seeking child support or any financial help the law might provide." The mention of Adrian's name triggered a wave of conflicting emotions in Eleanor: anger, sorrow, and a glimmer of lingering love. She had been too proud, or perhaps too frightened, to consider legal action before. The mere idea of dragging her once-beloved partner into court felt like another betrayal of her hopes for a reconciled family. But she had to face the reality her baby needed stability, and she was running out of ways to provide it alone. By the time Elena was discharged, Patricia had connected her with a pro bono legal clinic. There, Elena was introduced to Marcia Bradshaw, a determined young attorney with kind eyes who specialized in family law. And with that single step, the trajectory of Elena's world began to shift. Marcia Bradshaw's office was modest, nestled in a worn-out building housing various non-profits. Unlike the gleaming high-rises of Davenport Holdings, the space here was cramped and the elevator often broken. But Elena immediately felt at ease. There was an air of sincerity in Marcia's posture as she gestured for Elena to sit. As Elena recounted her story, Marcia listened intently, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. The attorney's brow furrowed when Elena described giving birth alone in an alley, and the subsequent silence from Adrian. "If Adrian Davenport is the father," Marcia said carefully, "we can pursue a paternity test, child support, and potentially more. But you must be prepared for a fight. The Davenports are powerful, and they're not going to roll out a welcome mat." Fear and resolve wrestled within Elena. She cradled hope as the baby fussed her cries, echoing through the cramped room. Elena knew she was venturing into uncharted territory, a world of court documents and depositions, but she no longer had the luxury of choice. Leaving Marcia's office, Elena felt a rush of anxious determination. The protective walls she'd tried to build around her heartbreak were slowly giving way to a new resolve. "I will fight for my daughter's future." The day the official letter arrived at Davenport Holdings was one Adrian would never forget. The engraved envelope, bore Marcia Bradshaw's name and the words "Notice of Paternity and Child Support Hearing." Adrian stared at the letter, his mind racing, heart pounding as he read through the legal jargon. He felt a maelstrom of emotions. Anger at the sudden intrusion into his carefully curated life. Guilt for having let things spiral so far. And a strange flicker of relief that at last the question of Elena would be addressed. He remembered how he once imagined proposing to her on a yacht in the Adriatic Sea. How he had envisioned a future of laughter and children running around an estate in Lake Forest. That dream had evaporated into thin air, replaced by board meetings and silent phone calls. Mark Henderson, Adrian's attorney and friend, read the document over his shoulder. "You need to deal with this carefully," Mark warned. "If the test proves the child is yours, you can't ignore it. Not legally, not morally." Without responding, Adrian set the letter aside, fists clenched. He felt cornered and betrayed, yet he couldn't deny an inexplicable ache in his chest. A child. His child. That realization would change everything. Elena's first court hearing was scheduled at the Cook County Circuit Court. The antique architecture of the courthouse, with its towering pillars and hushed halls, made her feel both insignificant and strangely hopeful. She clutched hope tightly, trying to focus on the rhythmic breathing of her baby, rather than the hammering of her own heart. Anxiety pinned her to her seat in the waiting area. She wasn't dressed in designer clothing or accompanied by a legal entourage. All she had was Marcia by her side. She couldn't help but recall the glittering galas she had once attended with Adrian. It seemed surreal that she was now about to face him in a courtroom. When Adrian finally arrived, Elena felt her breath hitch. He looked every bit the polished millionaire-tailored suit, polished shoes, cool confidence. Yet in his eyes, she glimpsed a flicker of something that looked a lot like regret. The hearing was brief. Judge Isaac Moretti, known for his stern demeanor, listened attentively as Marcia outlined the need for an immediate paternity test. Adrian's legal team, led by a seasoned lawyer named Robert King, tried to dismiss the case as a baseless claim. But Judge Moretti ordered the test without hesitation, setting in motion the legal machinery that would forever link their fates. The paternity test results came back positive. Adrian Davenport was indeed Hope's father. The news spread through the corridors of Davenport Holdings like wildfire, fueling office gossip and shaking the family's pristine image. Adrian's stepmother, Lucinda Davenport, practically frothed at the mouth with indignation, convinced Elena was nothing more than a cunning gold digger. Behind closed doors, Adrian's board of directors were not pleased either. The timing could not have been worse. Davenport Holdings was on the cusp of closing a multi-million-dollar deal with Morgan Stanley, and shareholders feared negative press might jeopardize the negotiations. Whispers of damage control echoed in the executive suites, while social media buzzed with rumors, speculation, and paparazzi snapshots. For Elena, the test result was a bittersweet vindication. She had never doubted who Hope's father was, but seeing the official paperwork gave her a momentary surge of courage. Marcia assured her that the next steps formalizing child support, possibly negotiating custody rights, were well within her legal claims. Still, a pang of sadness clung to her. Despite her anger and hurt, a small part of her had yearned for an apology or some show of remorse from Adrian that went beyond mere legal obligation. But for now, the fight had only just begun, as the public eye turned toward the unfolding drama media outlets, scrambled for angles. The Chicago Tribune ran a headline, "Millionaire Heir, Adrian Davenport," in paternity scandal. Talk shows, tabloid websites, and social media hashtags proliferated. Meanwhile, Elena found herself fending off reporters who camped outside the shelter, where she sometimes volunteered, eager to snap pictures of her with hope. Marcia advised Elena to maintain privacy and focus on the court proceedings, but the relentless intrusion weighed on her. She worried about how the press would frame her story. She was not a schemer, nor was she some naive girl chasing a wealthy man's fortune. She was simply a mother, fighting for her child's rightful support. Adrian, on the other hand, had spun into a crisis management frenzy. Robert King arranged a discreet meeting with Marcia to gauge the possibility of settling out of court. They proposed a lump sum of money in exchange for full custody, hoping to shield the Davenport name from ongoing scandal. Eleanor was appalled by the suggestion that she might sell her child to a father who had been absent throughout her pregnancy and her daughter's early months. For Elena, the lines were clear. She wanted Adrian to be involved in Hope's life, but not at the cost of being pushed aside like an inconvenience. A crucial turning point arrived when Marcia scheduled a mediation session. The goal was to see if a compromise could be reached without dragging the matter through a drawn-out trial. The sterile conference room in the courthouse felt suffocating, its white walls echoing even the slightest shuffle of papers. Eleanor sat on one side with Marcia. Adrian, flanked by Robert King, occupied the other. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Linda Moore, explained the process. "We're here to see if there's a middle ground," she said, her gentle tone attempting to melt the icy tension. Elena expected Adrian to open with a tirade or an accusation. Instead, he surprised her. I never meant for it to get to this," he began haltingly. I thought you'd moved on. I didn't know you were homeless or struggling. If I had known He trailed off, his eyes flickering with guilt. For a second, Eleanor felt her heart soften. She recalled the tenderness he once showed her, the man who never hesitated to hold her hand in public, who spoke of building a family someday. But then she remembered the labor pains, the cold alley, and the desperate nights. That memory hardened her resolve. A real apology wasn't enough. She needed a sincere commitment to her and Hope's well-being. The mediation session ended without a resolution. Adrian insisted he wanted to be part of Hope's life, but Robert King recommended that Elena relinquish physical custody in exchange for generous financial compensation. Elena stood firm, refusing to let Adrian come and go at will, without shouldering true parental responsibility. Outside the courthouse, media photographers snapped pictures capturing the tension etched on Elena's face and the discomfort in Adrian's posture. Headlines spun wildly: heirs, love child, sparks. Heated custody battle. Mother of Davenport. Baby rejects lavish settlement. Elena returned to her cramped room that night, emotionally drained. Though she believed she was making the right choices for Hope, fear gnawed at her. She worried about the financial might of the Davenport family, their ability to drag her through an endless legal process. Would she be forced into a settlement just to keep her daughter secure? After putting Hope to sleep, Elena found a quiet moment to look through old photographs. She remembered happier days, times when Adrian would spin her around the living room while jazz music played in the background. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago. Resolute and exhausted, she reminded herself of the life she wanted to build for her daughter, a life free from fear and uncertainty. Tensions soared as the custody hearing approached. Judge Moretti had ordered a child services evaluation to assess both parents' living conditions and emotional capacity to care for Hope. A social worker named Clara Nolan visited Elena's humble accommodations, noting the cleanliness and the bond between mother and child, despite the limited resources. A week later, Clara arrived at Adrian's penthouse, located in a prestigious building overlooking Lake Michigan. The interior was immaculate, polished marble floors, high ceilings, and unobstructed view of the city skyline. But as Clara carefully asked Adrian questions about his role as a father, his responses seemed practiced as if guided by legal coaching. Behind the scenes, Adrian struggled. On one hand, he genuinely wanted to connect with the daughter he'd only just discovered. On the other, he felt immense pressure from his family and corporate obligations. There were times he'd slip away to his private office, gazing at the paternity test results, and wondering what kind of father he could be if he barely knew how to slow down. When Clara concluded her visits, she prepared a thorough report for the court, one that would weigh heavily in determining custody arrangements. Both Elena and Adrian braced themselves, not knowing which way the scales of justice would tip. The morning of the custody hearing dawned grey and chilly, reflecting the mood that enveloped the courthouse. Journalists lined the entrance cameras, flashing with relentless curiosity. Elena felt faint, her stomach churning from a mix of nerves and residual hunger. She'd skipped breakfast, having lost her appetite. In the courtroom, Judge Moretti wasted no time. Clara Nolan's report highlighted that while Adrian could offer financial stability and a luxurious environment, he had yet to demonstrate any hands-on parenting skills. Elena, on the other hand, had been the sole caregiver, albeit in impoverished circumstances, showing unwavering devotion to the child's welfare. Marcia argued passionately that Hope deserved not just money, but emotional security. She insisted that uprooting the infant from her mother's care would be traumatic. Robert King countered, emphasizing Adrian's resources and willingness to employ the best nannies, tutors, and medical specialists. He framed it as an opportunity for Hope to flourish in ways that Elena could never provide. Judge Moretti listened carefully, his face unreadable. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, he announced that he would take the matter under advisement. The final decision would be pronounced in a week's time. Eleanor exited the courtroom with her heart pounding, wondering if she would lose the only family she had left. As the days ticked by, Elena found herself swinging between fragile hope and crushing dread. The media coverage intensified, and she even discovered online forums where people debated her life like a soap opera, some branding her a gold digger, others calling Adrian a deadbeat father. Adrian retreated into isolation. He cancelled public appearances, delegated board responsibilities, and spent long hours alone in his penthouse. Each evening, he replayed memories of Elena in his mind, the warmth of her laughter, the strength she possessed even in adversity. Guilt coiled within him, especially when he thought about how he'd cut her off without an explanation. One evening, rummaging through old photo albums, Adrian stumbled upon a note Eleanor had once slipped into his briefcase, a small letter filled with her dreams for their future. Her handwriting read, "I believe in you. I believe in us." Adrian felt tears sting his eyes. He realized, perhaps too late, that his misguided attempts to shield his inheritance and reputation had cost him the one person who believed in his better self. With renewed determination, Adrian picked up the phone and dialed Mark Henderson's number. "I want to make this right," he said quietly, feeling the weight of each syllable. "Tell me how." The next day, Marcia's phone rang. On the line was Mark Henderson proposing a private meeting between Adrian and Eleanor without the glare of the media or the influence of attorneys. Marcia hesitated, but eventually agreed, sensing that dialogue might bridge the chasm between them. Elena was skeptical. She didn't want another meeting where Adrian's lawyer waved large checks in her face. But Marcia convinced her that maybe, just maybe, Adrian had finally seen the light. So on a chilly Friday evening, under the discreet arrangement of Mark and Marcia, Eleanor took a taxi to a small cafe in an unassuming part of town. Adrian was already waiting, hunched over a table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He stood up the moment Elena entered, his eyes immediately darting to the infant carrier in her arms. Hope was asleep, her tiny nose peeking out from beneath a knitted pink hat. For a tense moment, neither spoke. Then in a hushed tone, Adrian broke the silence. "She's beautiful." He hesitantly reached out, brushing a gentle fingertip across Hope's tiny hand. Elena's heart constricted. In that moment, she saw not the millionaire heir, but a father astonished by his child. They sat down, words tumbling out hesitantly at first, but soon flowing. Apologies, regrets, confessions of fear and pride. Outside the wind howled, but inside that modest cafe, a fragile truce began to form. Elena left the cafe feeling as if she had just stepped off a roller coaster. She and Adrian had talked for hours about the lost months, her homelessness, the labor in an alley, his blind ambition, and the manipulative counsel of those around him. Despite her lingering anger, she couldn't deny that Adrian seemed genuine in his remorse, his eyes brimming with emotion whenever Hope made a tiny cooing sound. Though no concrete agreement was forged, they had taken a step closer to understanding. Adrian promised Elena that he would no longer hide behind the corporate fortress. If the court granted joint custody, he vowed to be a present father to ensure that Hope knew he loved her. That night, Elena returned to the shelter with Hope asleep in her arms. She felt conflicted. Her brain still cautioned her not to let her guard down, reminding her of the heartbreak she'd endured. Yet her heart yearned to believe that Adrian could be the partner and father he once promised to be. A new thought nestled into her mind. Perhaps the best scenario for Hope would be a cooperative relationship. But cooperation required trust, and trust was something they'd both shattered. For now, all she could do was wait for the court's ruling and see if Adrian's actions matched his words. On the day of the final custody decision, the tension within the courtroom was palpable. Lawyers stood at their respective tables, thick files and documents stacked high. Photographers waited outside, hungry for a shot that could capture victory or defeat. Judge Moretti took his seat, scanning the room before beginning. In the matter of Davenport versus Carter, regarding custody of the minor. Hope Carter, I have reviewed the Child Services report, listened to both parties, and considered the best interest of the child. His voice resonated with authority. Elena clenched her hands tightly. Marcia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Adrian sat across from them, posture rigid. The judge explained that Hope deserved the love and care of both parents, provided each demonstrated fitness and genuine commitment. To that end, Judge Moretti continued, I am granting joint legal custody to both parties. Physical custody will remain primarily with Ms. Carter, given her demonstrated role as the primary caregiver. Mr. Davenport is granted visitation rights with a review scheduled in 6 months to determine if expanded custody is appropriate. Eleanor felt a surge of relief wash over her, tears pooling in her eyes. Adrian exhaled sharply, a complex mix of relief and resolve settling over him. The gavel's echo signaled a new chapter in their unfolding saga. In the days that followed the court's decision, Adrian took immediate steps to prove his commitment. He arranged for a modest but comfortable apartment for Eleanor and Hope, covering the lease so they no longer had to rely on the cramped quarters of the shelter. Initially, Elena resisted. She worried that accepting Adrian's help would become a new chain binding her to his will. But Marcia gently counseled that stable housing was essential for Hope's well-being, and Elena begrudgingly accepted. Still, she set boundaries. She refused to accept a personal driver or a credit card. "I want to stand on my own feet," she insisted. Adrian respected that choice, albeit with lingering concern. For Adrian, transitioning into fatherhood was humbling and at times awkward. He'd show up on weekends with groceries, baby toys, and books he was reading on how to care for infants. He took to heart every detail Elena offered: how to hold Hope correctly, how to burp her, how to recognize her different cries. Bit by bit, he caught glimpses of the daily struggles Elena endured: the midnight feedings, the diapers, the constant worry over money. With each late-night bottle he prepared, and each lullaby he learned, Adrian felt a foreign yet comforting sense of purpose awakening in him. As Hope reached 6 months old, her giggles and coos transformed the once quiet apartment into a place of joy and promise. Elena found part-time work at a local community center, helping to organize charity drives for families in need, a role that resonated deeply with her recent experiences. With Adrian's financial support for childcare, she could finally balance work and motherhood. Their co-parenting arrangement wasn't without its challenges. Adrian's demanding schedule sometimes caused him to miss scheduled visits, igniting Elena's frustration. In turn, Elena's pride often made it difficult to accept gifts or assistance beyond the bare minimum. They argued occasionally, old wounds and mistrust surfacing at the worst moments. Yet amid the strain, a growing sense of mutual respect emerged. Adrian discovered that being a father wasn't just about providing resources. It was about being present, listening to the stories of Hope's milestones, her first attempt at crawling her discovery of how to clap her hands with delight. Elena learned that she could lean on someone else without forfeiting her independence or identity. Slowly but steadily, they formed a tentative partnership focused on Hope's happiness, and in fleeting moments they caught themselves smiling at each other, recalling a lost tenderness that once bound them together. Just when things seemed to be reaching a fragile equilibrium, fate threw another curveball. A letter arrived from the Davenport family's legal team, informing Adrian that his extended family intended to challenge his ability to lead Davenport Holdings. Rumors of scandal and poor judgment swirled among board members. The story of Adrian's love child had dampened investor confidence, and certain factions within the company wanted him removed as CEO before the upcoming annual shareholder meeting. Adrian felt torn. The pressure from the board forced him into endless strategy sessions, leaving him little time for his newly formed paternal duties. Stress and sleepless nights once again plagued him, only this time the thought of losing his daughter's blossoming trust felt more terrifying than losing the company. Elena noticed Adrian's sudden absences, the unread texts, the last-minute cancellations. Old anxieties gnawed at her. Was he pulling away again when life became too complicated? But one night, Adrian showed up at the apartment unannounced, eyes dark with exhaustion. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "they're trying to oust me from the company. If I lose my position, I lose my standing, and with that I might lose credibility in court if custody is revisited." In that moment, Eleanor saw past his polished exterior to the vulnerable man she once loved. She felt a rush of sympathy, remembering her own struggles for survival. They were both fighting battles, each in a different arena, but connected by the same driving force, Hope's future. Determined not to let external forces tear them apart, Adrian and Elena found themselves working together in an unexpected way. While Adrian battled board politics, Elena, in her own quiet manner, stepped forward to defend him publicly. She gave a small interview to a local reporter, someone she trusted from her volunteer work, clarifying that Adrian was not the villain that tabloids painted him to be. "I won't deny our history is complicated," Elena said, cradling hope on her lap during the interview. "But Adrian Davenport has been stepping up as a father. He's learning, he's trying, and that means more to me than his net worth ever could." The interview went viral, eliciting mixed reactions. Some cynics claimed Elena had been bought off, while others admired her honesty. Yet the simple act of standing up for Adrian resonated with key investors who saw a different side of him. A man willing to own his mistakes and grow from them. As the annual shareholder meeting approached, the tension mounted. Adrian prepared presentations, gathered supportive statements, and readied a contingency plan if all else failed. At the same time, Elena braced herself for the possibility that the stability they'd just begun to enjoy might come crashing down should Adrian lose control of Davenport Holdings. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with all the drama of a high-stakes showdown. The boardroom at Davenport Holdings was buzzing with tension. Rows of leather chairs faced a large screen displaying financial graphs and corporate forecasts. Major investors from across the globe dialed in via video conference. Adrian presented his case, a transparent look at Davenport Holdings' performance under his leadership growth metrics and future plans. His voice was calm but firm, addressing controversies head-on. He even touched upon the paternity case, emphasizing that while the media had sensationalized his personal life, it had not impacted the company's profitability or strategic vision. Then, one by one, board members asked questions, some supportive, others accusatory. Lucinda Davenport. His stepmother led the charge to remove him, claiming he lacked the moral fiber to represent the company. Adrian countered calmly, reminding everyone that personal matters should not outweigh professional competence. In a surprising twist, Mark Henderson, Adrian's personal attorney, stood to share statements from philanthropic organizations praising Adrian's renewed commitment to social causes, some of which Elena had encouraged him to support. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. By the time the final vote was taken, it was announced that Adrian would retain his position as CEO, winning by a narrow margin. Relief washed over him, but as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew this was only one victory in a much larger battle for redemption. That evening, Adrian arrived at Elena's apartment with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower. While the gesture was simple, it was the first time in months he'd shown up for a reason other than fatherly duties or crisis management. Elena welcomed him inside, noticing the weariness etched on his face. They sat in the small living room, the sound of Hope's lullaby machine humming softly from the bedroom. Adrian recounted the day's events, the tension, the accusations, the final vote. Elena listened, relieved that he'd managed to hold on to his leadership role. In the quiet that followed, she found herself reminiscing aloud about their early days, the time they tried tandem skydiving in Nevada, the quiet mornings, sipping coffee on his penthouse balcony, how he would whisper jokes just to make her laugh. Adrian smiled sadly, acknowledging how far they had strayed from those moments. A flicker of vulnerability passed between them. For Elena, it was both comforting and unsettling. She realized they were no longer the starry-eyed couple they once were. Too many harsh realities had tested their bond. Yet in that fleeting moment, the possibility of forging a new relationship built on honesty and shared responsibility didn't seem so impossible. Over the following weeks, Adrian gradually transitioned into a more present, engaged father. No longer buried beneath the avalanche of corporate obligations, he restructured his schedule, hiring trusted deputies to manage the day-to-day operations of Davenport Holdings. That decision gave him something money couldn't buy: time. And he poured that time into being with Hope. He arrived early on weekends, often surprising Elena with breakfast in hand, usually slightly cold, but the thought warmed her. Together they experienced milestones that most parents took for granted. Adrian was there when Hope giggled uncontrollably at her first bubble bath, and when she tried to crawl only to topple face first onto a plush rug. He laughed, cheered, and even cried when Hope uttered her first word. Mama Eleanor teased him for pouting, but secretly she was touched by how deeply he cared. The community center where Elena worked was preparing for its biggest event, yet a charity gala supporting homeless mothers and children. It was a cause deeply personal to her, and she'd spent months helping to organize every detail. Nervously, she handed Adrian an invitation one evening. "You don't have to come," she said quickly. "It's small, nothing like the Davenport Foundation galas you're used to." Adrian studied the invitation. "Elena, if this matters to you, it matters to me." He insisted on donating, but she was firm. "Do it anonymously. I don't want anyone to think I'm parading you around for donations." He smiled. "Then I'll show up and clap the loudest when you take the mic." At the gala, Elena wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress borrowed from the center's donation wardrobe. She moved gracefully between guests, sharing her story without embellishing the tragedy or martyring herself. Sometimes life breaks you open so that light can get in. She told one donor eyes, briefly glancing toward Hope, sleeping in her stroller nearby. Adrian, standing at the edge of the crowd, watched her in awe. The woman he once saw only through the lens of romance had transformed into something even more formidable. An advocate, a leader, a survivor. After her speech, which ended with a standing ovation, Eleanor found Adrian waiting for her in the hallway, holding 2 cups of punch and looking slightly overwhelmed. "You were incredible," he said. "Honestly, I've never been prouder." Elena looked at him, unsure how to respond. So much had passed between them. Betrayal, distance, hardship. But in that moment, she saw none of it. She saw a man slowly shedding his armor, trying to rebuild what he had once destroyed. Later that night after the event, as they sat on Elena's couch, while Hope slept soundly in her crib, they spoke of dreams not just for their daughter, but for themselves. Not the extravagant kind from their past, but quiet, meaningful ones, starting a literacy program at the center, traveling someday with Hope, maybe even writing a children's book together. Though the future remained uncertain, the bond between them deepened, forged not through romance but resilience. And from that place, something new began to bloom. One crisp autumn afternoon, golden leaves spiraled down from the trees as Adrian took Elena and Hope on a quiet outing to the Chicago Botanic Garden. The air carried the faint scent of pine and earth, and laughter floated on the breeze from nearby families enjoying the rare sunny day. Hope, now full of energy and curiosity, sat in her stroller wide-eyed at every fluttering leaf and blooming petal, pointing and babbling in delight. Adrian pushed the stroller gently while Elena walked beside him. Their steps unhurried for the first time in a long while. The sunlight glinted through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the path. It felt almost surreal after all the months of legal battles, sleepless nights and heartbreak, to be here in a moment so peaceful and undisturbed. They paused near a small pond where ducks drifted lazily across the surface. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a few breadcrumbs he'd brought along. "Let's give her her first duck-feeding memory," he said, smiling as he handed a few crumbs to Elena and crouched beside Hope. The little girl squealed with glee as Adrian helped her toss them into the water. When they found a shaded bench beneath a tall oak tree, Elena sat down and leaned back, watching as Adrian continued to entertain Hope with silly faces and animated animal sounds. The bond between them had grown stronger, unmistakably genuine. Elena couldn't deny how far Adrian had come, not just in court appearances or financial responsibility, but in the daily unglamorous moments of fatherhood. Adrian eventually joined her on the bench, sitting close, but careful not to presume too much. There was a long silence before he spoke. "I've been thinking," he said, eyes fixed on Hope, playing with a leaf in her tiny hands. "About everything. How far we've come, and how far I still need to go." Elena turned her head toward him, listening intently. "I know I can't rewrite the past," he continued, "but I want to build something better for her, for us. I'm not talking about a perfect family wrapped in a bow. I know we're not there, but maybe we could try again. Not just as co-parents, but as something more." Elena felt her breath catch slightly. She looked down at their intertwined hands, remembering every low point, the alley, the courtroom, the nights when she doubted she could survive. And yet here he was, not the arrogant millionaire she had once feared, but a man learning to love with humility and care. "I don't have an answer right now," she said softly, brushing a wind-blown curl from her face. "But I'm willing to keep walking forward with you. One step at a time." Adrian nodded slowly, clearly moved. "That's all I could hope for." As the sun dipped lower and the shadows lengthened, the three of them sat in quiet harmony, watching the ducks glide across the pond. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. It was healing, and it was theirs. 3 months later, the sharp bite of winter had returned, but Elena Carter no longer feared the cold. She stood inside a modest but warm townhouse nestled on a quiet street in Evanston, a far cry from the shelter beds and crumbling walls of her past. The house was part of a new chapter she and Adrian had begun, one rooted not in old promises, but in careful progress. They had agreed to co-parent under one roof, not as lovers, but as partners in raising their daughter. Separate bedrooms, separate routines, but shared goals and growing respect. Hope toddled across the hardwood floor in mismatched socks, giggling as she clutched her favorite stuffed bear. Adrian sat cross-legged nearby, trying to baby-proof the bookshelf with instructions that might as well have been written in Greek. "These screws are evil," he muttered, prompting a laugh from Elena as she walked in with 2 mugs of tea. They still clashed now and then over money, over chores, over what constituted a suitable bedtime snack. But unlike before, they had learned how to listen. Arguments no longer escalated into cold silences. Instead, they ended with open conversations and quiet apologies. It was messy, imperfect, and very human. Their evenings had taken on a quiet rhythm. After Hope's bath, they'd gather in the small living room, with warm blankets and board books. Adrian had developed a flair for dramatic bedtime readings, complete with voices and sound effects that left Hope squealing with joy, and Elena smiling in spite of herself. When Hope was finally tucked into bed, the adults often lingered, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the silence that comes after a day well lived. One night, as snow flurries drifted past the window, Elena turned to Adrian and shared a new idea she'd been working on, expanding the community center's outreach to include legal aid and early childhood support. Adrian, genuinely impressed, offered to connect her with some of his philanthropic contacts, not as a favor, but as a collaborator. "You're building something powerful, Elena," he said. "It deserves the spotlight." "And you," she asked, "what are you building now?" He hesitated. I think I'm learning how to build a life, not just a legacy. Something real. Something that doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off." They exchanged a long glance full of unspoken understanding. There was no rush to define what they were neither fully reconciled nor completely apart. What mattered was the space they'd created, one of safety, of effort, of love, expressed in small daily acts. Elena often thought back to that night in the alley, shivering, terrified, alone. It had marked the beginning of the hardest chapter in her life, but it had also led her here, to warmth, to healing, to possibility. As hope stirred softly in her crib, her tiny breaths echoing through the baby monitor, Elena whispered into the quiet, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. Their journey had been anything but easy, from betrayal to legal showdowns, from lonely nights on city streets to the glaring lights of a courtroom. Yet somewhere along the way, Eleanor Carter and Adrian Davenport found a fragile strength they never knew they possessed. Through bitter truths and hard-fought compromises, they discovered that genuine love goes beyond a lavish bank account or an ironclad legal contract. It's built on presence, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to giving Hope the life she deserves. As their story continues to unfold, one truth remains clear. No matter how rocky the path, redemption and new beginnings are always possible with courage and determination. If you found inspiration or solace in this tale of resilience and the power of a parent's love, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that touch the heart and awaken hope. From the outside, Jonathan Cole's life gleamed like a storybook fairy tale. A self-made millionaire in the heart of Manhattan, he graced glossy magazine covers, mingled with world leaders, and never missed a chance to flaunt his success. Yet behind the tall glass windows of his penthouse, tensions brewed. A secret text here, a guarded phone call there, and rumors whispered of a tangled affair that threatened to explode. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan, Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only 2 people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard, and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. He's just going through a busy phase, she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend he'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, she dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize." By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice, softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance, with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, it was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a five-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year. Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick, coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology. Though Tony listened, Alicia sensed a general distraction in the group, as if her words were overshadowed by the silent drama swirling between Jonathan and Veronica. She pressed on regardless, determined to stand her ground. Partway through the evening, Alicia watched from across the ballroom as Jonathan and Veronica slipped out onto the balcony. Their silhouettes formed tense outlines in the moonlight. Alicia could almost feel the strain in their stances. When they returned, Jonathan was stone-faced, while Veronica looked tearful. The rest of the gala played out in a haze, Alicia's mind spinning with questions. Why was Jonathan risking such a public display if he truly had nothing to hide? On the ride home, Jonathan was silent. Alicia debated whether to confront him. Fear of the truth won out. She remained quiet, letting the hush fill the back seat like a suffocating blanket. One thing was certain: the veneer of their marriage was cracking fast. Weeks after the gala, Alicia woke one morning to a series of text messages from unknown numbers. Each one contained the same cryptic statement: "You deserve better. Check your emails." Shaken, she logged into her personal email account and found an anonymous note with an attachment. The note read, "He's not who you think he is. Trust me, I work with them. This has gone on too long. You should know." Hands trembling, Alicia opened the attachment. Her eyes widened at what she saw. Screenshots of phone call logs, countless late-night messages and photos from Veronica King, all addressed to Jonathan. Some were innocuous, referencing business deals, but others were clearly personal phrases like, "Missing you last night was unforgettable and can't wait until we're alone again," leaped off the screen. A wave of shock crashed over Alicia. She felt like she was floating outside her body, watching herself shatter. She reread the messages, searching for any plausible explanation besides the obvious. Perhaps they were fabricated, or maybe there was some context missing. Yet the depth and frequency of the conversations were undeniable. Jonathan had been carrying on a secret affair with Veronica, and someone inside Cole Capital or close to them had decided to expose it. Through her tears, Alicia tried to remain rational. She recognized some of the timestamps. They aligned perfectly with nights Jonathan claimed to be overseas or tied up in emergency meetings. Worse, there were photos of the two at a private beach, Veronica in a sun hat, Jonathan leaning into her with a tenderness Alicia once believed was reserved only for their marriage. The date stamps matched the weekend he was supposedly in Boston. Alicia doubled over as waves of nausea seized her, uncertain if it was morning sickness or heartbreak. She clutched her phone, tears splashing onto the screen. The anonymous tip had obliterated any chance of maintaining her illusions. Betrayal now stood naked before her, leaving no room for doubt. She scrolled through the messages again, feeling her grief transform into rage. She was pregnant with this man's child, while he gallivanted with another woman behind her back. Was this what their marriage was worth? In desperation, Alicia tried calling Jonathan. No answer. She left a trembling voice message. "We need to talk. Now." Then she buried her face in a pillow, sobbing until exhaustion closed her eyes. The world felt cruel, and she wondered if she had the strength to confront what came next. Jonathan returned home late that evening to find Alicia sitting on the living room couch, the glow of a single lamp illuminating her tear-streaked face. The instant he saw her reddened eyes, he knew something had changed. She said nothing at first, only holding out her phone. He glanced at the screen and visibly paled. Silent seconds stretched as he read through the texts and pictures. Alicia noticed the flicker of guilt crossing his face before he masked it with a forced calmness. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice low. "Does it matter?" she replied. "They're real, aren't they?" He exhaled shakily, dropping into a seat across from her. "It's complicated. Veronica and I don't want excuses." Alicia's voice trembled with quiet fury. "I want to know how you could do this while I'm pregnant with your child." Jonathan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "It started as a mistake, Alicia. I was at a conference, we had too much to drink." "That's not an excuse," she snapped. "You lied to me for months." "No years, given these time stamps. You made me doubt my own sanity." He tried to speak, but the words choked in his throat. Instead, tears brimmed in his eyes. Alicia found it almost pitiful. She had once adored this man, who seemed larger than life. Now he looked small, lost, and pathetic, snared in the aftermath of his own betrayal. Eventually, he confessed to an ongoing affair with Veronica. They had grown close while working on high-stakes deals. Their relationship escalated during out-of-town conferences, fueled by adrenaline and the thrill of secrecy. Jonathan insisted it was never about love, but about tension relief and escaping the pressures he faced at Cole Capital. His rationale shattered the last vestiges of Alicia's sympathy. She pointed to her baby bump. "What about me? Your child. Did you ever think about the risk emotionally? Physically?" Jonathan attempted an apology, but the words felt hollow. Alicia erupted pent-up fury, spilling out in a storm of accusations. She recounted every suspicious sign she'd overlooked, how she'd supported his career, how she had endured him missing prenatal appointments. Underneath her anger lay a deep sadness for the life she thought they were building, a life that Jonathan had so casually betrayed. By the time the confrontation ended, Alicia felt emotionally gutted. Jonathan slept in his study that night, if he slept at all. She stared at her bedroom ceiling, tears soaking her pillow, wrestling with how to move forward. The next morning, she awakened to the knowledge that her heartbreak was only beginning, and so was Jonathan's downfall. In the days following Alicia's discovery, Jonathan scrambled to patch up his personal and professional worlds. He promised Veronica he would handle the situation, but that Alicia would always be his priority. He reassured Alicia that he would end the affair immediately, that he would do whatever it took to save their marriage. However, Alicia watched his panic with an air of detachment. Her trust in him was already shattered. Then came the social media explosion. One Monday morning, A popular finance gossip blog, The Street Whisperer, posted a scathing article, "Billionaire Jonathan Cole's Secret Affair, Exposed Exclusive Photos." The piece included leaked pictures of Jonathan and Veronica embracing in what appeared to be a private cabana at a tropical resort. The blog teased additional salacious details forthcoming. Within hours, major business news outlets like Bloomberg and CNBC picked up the story, albeit more cautiously. They framed it as a scandal-rocking Cole Capital Ventures. Stock forums buzzed with speculation about how this might affect Jonathan's leadership and the firm's reputation. On Twitter, finance influencers dissected the ethical implications, with some calling for Jonathan to step down. Jonathan's phone lit up with calls from board members, investors, and perplexed clients. Even Lucy Goldstein, who had once praised him for philanthropic endeavors, publicly condemned his distraction from the greater mission of ethical business. The timing was disastrous. He had been on the cusp of finalizing a massive investment partnership with Tony McAllister. Now everything was in jeopardy. Alicia, reading the news coverage with weary eyes, felt a surge of anger. She had never wanted a public scandal. She would have preferred a private reckoning. But now that the world knew, she felt oddly vindicated. No longer was she alone in suspecting Jonathan's duplicity. Everyone saw it. Even so, she worried about the toll this uproar might exact on her unborn child. Less than 24 hours later, a video surfaced of Jonathan and Veronica walking hand in hand through a hotel lobby in Paris, laughing as though they didn't have a care in the world. The date stamp revealed it was just 2 months prior, around the same time Alicia had told him about her pregnancy. Public outrage soared and investors panicked. Jonathan's carefully curated brand, self-made entrepreneur, philanthropic benefactor, devoted husband, was crumbling under a relentless digital onslaught. In the midst of the uproar, Alicia received a second anonymous email. This time it contained receipts of hush money, transfers from Jonathan's personal account to an offshore entity with references to Veronica's name. The sender wrote, "He's been paying to keep certain things quiet. Thought you should know." Alicia's heart pounded as she examined the evidence. It looked like Jonathan had been funneling funds, possibly to secure Veronica's silence or cooperation. The sum was staggering enough to fund a dozen scholarships or a new arts program in any given school. The revelation further corroded Alicia's hope that Jonathan could ever be the man she once believed him to be. She confronted him the following evening, brandishing printouts of the transactions. "You're bribing her now. Is this blackmail?" "Hush money." "What else have you been hiding?" Jonathan, cornered, admitted. He'd been trying to preempt any public scandal, fearing precisely what was happening now. Veronica wanted compensation for her efforts on certain deals, he claimed. She threatened to go to the competition, or worse, to the media. "I had to protect our company, our name." "Is this your idea of protection?" Alicia spat tears stinging her eyes. "Lying, paying people off, it's disgusting. You betrayed me, betrayed your own ethics if you ever had them." Jonathan's face twisted. "Don't say that. I messed up. But everything I did was to protect us, to keep the family intact." Alicia laughed bitterly, clutching her pregnant belly. "And how's that working out for you? The world knows now. You might lose everything. And me. I don't know if there's any us left to protect." She stormed out, leaving Jonathan staring at the damning documents. On the street, Alicia's mind whirled. She felt trapped, tied by marriage, soon to be tied by parenthood, yet confronted with the ultimate betrayal. The outside world offered no solace, either its eyes fixated on the spectacle of Jonathan's downfall. For a moment she wondered if leaving the city altogether would be the only way to save her sanity. But deep in her heart, Alicia knew she had to stand and face the storm, if not for herself, then for the child growing inside her. Within a week, Jonathan's scandal dominated the business news cycle. Forbes ran an op-ed titled "The Tragic Fall of Finance's Golden Boy," analyzing how personal irresponsibility could sink even the most profitable venture. Share prices for coal, Capital Ventures nosedived, rattling the firm's board of directors and raising alarms among major investors. Social media took an especially brutal stance. Under the hashtag #CoalCollapse, thousands commented on Jonathan's hypocrisy, calling him a poster child for toxic corporate culture. Alicia's name also trended, though more sympathetically. Strangers on the internet expressed solidarity for a pregnant wife betrayed on a global stage. Some urged her to take him for all he's worth, while others championed her as a potential advocate for women wronged by powerful men. Within Coal Capital's walls, tension soared. The workforce split into factions. Some remained loyal to Jonathan, believing the scandal was a personal matter that shouldn't overshadow his accomplishments. Others blamed him for tarnishing the company's name, an act of negligence that jeopardized everyone's jobs. David Lynn tried to calm internal chaos, but rumors circulated that half the board wanted Jonathan removed. Veronica, for her part, took a leave of absence, claiming stress from the public harassment. No one knew if she'd be back. Amid the chaos, Alicia found herself hounded by reporters camped outside the penthouse, cameras and microphones at the ready. She refused to answer questions or open the door, feeling the walls close in on her. Her phone buzzed with calls from tabloids, offering huge sums for an exclusive interview. She declined them all. Journalists even visited her parents' bakery, peppering them with invasive questions. Her mother, Lucia, called Alicia in tears, apologizing for not knowing what to do. Alicia felt a wave of guilt. Her private tragedy had become a public spectacle, and those she loved were collateral damage. Deep inside, a new resolve formed. Alicia realized she had the power to shape her own narrative, rather than let the scandal swirl around her uncontested. She was the wronged party, she had a voice, and if she spoke, the world would listen. Whether that voice would bring healing or further destruction, she didn't yet know. But she was done sitting quietly, while Jonathan's duplicity overshadowed her entire life. During one sleepless night, Alicia stared at old photos on her phone. Her and Jonathan beaming at their wedding, her reading to children at the community center, him unveiling a giant check for a local library. The happy memories contrasted so sharply with the heartbreak she now endured. She felt betrayed not just by Jonathan, but by the entire facade of perfection they once presented. At some point, she scrolled through messages of support from friends, even strangers on social media. People urged her to fight to stand up for herself and her unborn baby. She mulled over the idea of making a public statement, something to reclaim her dignity, but also to call out Jonathan's actions without stooping to sensationalism. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. If you need a platform to share your side, we have your back." Signed, Anna Brooks, women's advocate today. Alicia recognized the name Anna Brooks as a well-known journalist and feminist advocate. Anna's open letters had previously brought attention to issues like wage gaps and domestic abuse. The text felt genuine, a rare sign of compassion in a media landscape that often thrived on sensationalism. Alicia's heart pounded. Could she trust Anna to handle her story ethically? The next morning, Alicia called Anna. Their conversation lasted almost an hour. Anna listened without interruption as Alicia spoke of her heartbreak, her isolation, and her fears for her future. She clarified that her aim wasn't to harm Jonathan's career out of spite, but to stand up for her own life and child. Anna offered to arrange a press conference, a controlled environment where Alicia could present her perspective. No tabloid spin, no paparazzi ambush. Alicia agreed, though the decision left her trembling with anticipation and dread. That afternoon, Alicia met with a lawyer who specialized in marital law. She wanted to understand her rights, especially with a baby on the way. While part of her considered divorce, another part still grappled with the love she'd once felt for Jonathan. The lawyer recommended caution, explaining how a public statement might influence settlement negotiations or custody issues. Alicia nodded gravely, fully aware that once she spoke publicly, there would be no going back. In just a few days, Anna Brooks secured a small event space in Midtown, not far from Times Square. The press invite was circulated discreetly among reputable journalists and media outlets. The announcement was simple: Alicia Cole, wife of Jonathan Cole, to make a statement regarding recent events. Despite the short notice, the event attracted major attention. Producers from major networks like CNN, MSNBC, and even BBC reached out, eager to broadcast the story of a betrayed wife taking a stand against her millionaire husband. Anna Brooks handled logistics, ensuring Alicia would have privacy to arrive and depart without being mobbed by cameras. In the background, Alicia's lawyer hovered, uneasy about how the press conference might affect legal proceedings. Still, Alicia was resolute. This was her narrative to tell. On the eve of the press conference, Alicia worked on her statement in a quiet corner of her parents' bakery, inhaling the comforting scent of fresh bread. Her mother brought her a warm mug of chamomile tea, gently stroking her daughter's hair. "You'll do what's right," Lucia whispered, eyes filled with motherly concern. Alicia's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Please don't do this. We can fix it privately. Think of our child." She stared at the words, bitterness surging. She typed back, "It's too late for that. You should have thought of our child before you betrayed us." Then she turned off her phone, refocusing on the words she planned to read before the world. Inside her, a swirl of emotions raged: heartbreak, anger, but also an underlying sense of empowerment. She was no longer the supportive wife in the background of Jonathan's success story. She was stepping forward, pregnant and wounded, but ready to claim her truth. Whatever happened next, she promised herself she would be honest, not just for herself, but for all the women who had reached out, telling her to be strong. A brisk wind blew through Manhattan on the morning of Alicia's press conference. Cameras were already set up by the time she arrived, escorted by Anna Brooks. The modest venue could seat about 100 reporters, but more were spilling out the door, forming a crowd on the sidewalk. A hush fell as Alicia stepped onto the small stage, her baby bump subtly outlined beneath a black wrap dress. Anna stood beside her like a protective shield. Flashes lit the room. Alicia took a deep breath, heart pounding so loudly she feared the microphone would pick it up. She glanced at her note cards, then at the sea of expectant faces. She began, voice trembling at first. "Good morning. My name is Alicia Cole, and I'm here to speak about the scandal involving my husband, Jonathan Cole, and his affair with Veronica King. For weeks now, I've watched as this story has been told by tabloids, blogs, and the rumor mill. Today, I want to present the truth from my perspective." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I have been married to Jonathan for 3 years, and we are expecting a child. I believed in him, stood by him, built a life with him. But I recently discovered, along with the rest of the world, that he was engaged in an extramarital relationship. I have read the same articles, seen the same images. They are devastating, especially given my pregnancy. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every flicker of emotion on her face. Alicia continued, her voice growing steadier. I do not share this to invite pity or to be a pawn in a public spectacle. I share it because women mothers deserve the truth when it comes to the integrity of the men we marry. And because I believe accountability matters, whether you're a private individual or a public figure who touts ethical leadership. She then revealed Jonathan's attempts to cover up the affair, even referencing hush money documents. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alicia clarified, I stand here not to destroy Jonathan Cole, but to claim my future and the future of my child free from deception. I believe marriage is a partnership built on trust, and once that trust is broken so thoroughly, we must face the reality of what remains. With tears brimming, Alicia concluded, I'm asking for privacy and respect as I decide the next steps for my family. I'm grateful for the outpouring of support. My hope is that by speaking my truth, I can begin healing and perhaps encourage others facing similar betrayal to do the same. She stepped back from the podium, a trembling hush sweeping the room. Cameras zoomed in on her tear-streaked face as Anna guided her away. The press conference had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it was enough to ignite a media firestorm that would shake Jonathan Cole's empire to its core. The press conference footage went viral within hours, dominating TV headlines and flooding social media timelines. Clips of Alicia's trembling yet resolute voice played on a loop. Hashtags like #AliciaCole and #truth4 women trended globally. Celebrity talk show hosts weighed in praising her bravery. Prominent women's advocacy groups hailed Alicia as a hero for publicly confronting the betrayal. Jonathan Cole, meanwhile, faced an immediate backlash. Investors who had hesitated to sever ties earlier now flocked away from Cole Capital Ventures in droves, unwilling to align themselves with a leader so publicly indicted by his own wife. The firm's stock plummeted further. A joint venture with Tony McAllister was placed on indefinite hold. In a statement to the press, Tony cited concerns about leadership ethics and stability. Inside Cole Capital, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The consensus was grim. Jonathan's personal scandal had become a public relations nightmare. A formal vote of no confidence was scheduled for the following week to decide his future at the company he'd built from scratch. Some long-time allies still defended him, claiming that personal issues shouldn't overshadow professional achievements, but they were outnumbered by those pointing to the spiraling finances and brand damage. Jonathan retreated to the penthouse, blinds drawn, refusing to comment publicly. Even Veronica King was nowhere to be found, rumored to be on an extended stay in London. For Alicia, the whirlwind of support and media attention felt surreal. Every time she logged online, she saw strangers praising her courage, dissecting her press conference, or labeling Jonathan a monster. She had never wanted to be the face of a movement, but she felt a growing sense of responsibility to use the platform fate had handed her. In private, she grappled with heartbreak and anxiety about the future. She had awakened in a gilded cage, her wealthy lifestyle now overshadowed by betrayal. Yet the press conference had sparked something new, a sense of agency. For the first time since discovering Jonathan's affair, she could breathe freely, certain she was controlling her own path. And that path would soon demand another step, deciding whether to stay in the marriage or proceed with a legal separation. At Cole Capital Ventures, the board of directors convened the crucial vote. The meeting room had never felt so tense. David Lynn sat at one end of the table, his face grim. Over half the chairs were occupied by men and women who once revered Jonathan as a visionary. Now they stared at financial projections, plummeting into the red, accompanied by slideshow images of negative media headlines referencing the coal scandal. The intangible toll, public distrust, moral outrage, was just as damaging. Jonathan, face pale and eyes rimmed with exhaustion, delivered a desperate plea. He promised to rectify the situation, citing therapy crisis management strategies and a vow to refocus on the firm's core mission. "I've made mistakes," he admitted hoarsely. "But our track record of delivering value can't be overlooked. We are bigger than one scandal. We can still thrive if we stay united." Some board members shifted uncomfortably. A few, including David Lynn, tried to salvage the conversation, arguing for a temporary leave of absence instead of outright dismissal. But the majority believed drastic action was required to restore credibility. A hush blanketed the room as the members cast their anonymous votes. When the tallies were read, the verdict was clear. Jonathan Cole was removed as CEO, effective immediately. Tremors of shock rippled through the halls. Cole Capital employees, once starry-eyed by Jonathan's leadership, watched him clear his office with a mix of pity and muted anger. A caretaker CEO was appointed to stabilize the ship, focusing on damage control. David Lynn glanced at Jonathan with a sorrowful expression as security escorted him out. "I'm sorry, man," David whispered. "I tried to fight for you." Jonathan nodded wordlessly, clutching a box of personal belongings. By evening, business publications around the world proclaimed Cole Capital ousts founder amid scandal. Jonathan's reign was officially over. The man who once soared across the financial stratosphere was now unemployed, disgraced, and teetering on the edge of complete ruin. Jonathan's life unspooled in disarray. With no office to report to, he holed up in the penthouse, ignoring calls from journalists. He occasionally ventured out in sunglasses and a baseball cap, only to be ambushed by paparazzi. Online comments labeled him a cautionary tale of greed and infidelity. Some articles even suggested the affair had been an open secret among New York's finance circles, fueling new levels of scrutiny. Personal finances also took a hit. Jonathan's sudden exit from Cole Capital triggered contractual penalties. He faced possible breach of contract lawsuits tied to deals he'd spearheaded but failed to close. Frozen lines of credit cancelled invitations to VIP events. His social and financial power dwindled. Amid his downward spiral, Jonathan tried repeatedly to contact Alicia, leaving voicemails and handwritten notes. He apologized profusely, claiming he was ready to do anything to salvage their relationship. "I'll go to counseling, sign post-nups. Anything you want." One note. Read. But Alicia remained resolute, focusing instead on her own well-being and that of her unborn child. The final blow came when Alicia's press conference was replayed in a prime-time special with a commentary panel dissecting Jonathan's betrayal. The segment ended with a heartfelt interview of Alicia by Anna Brooks, highlighting Alicia's philanthropic ambitions. Footage showed Alicia visiting an after-school program, receiving cheers from children who recognized her from news coverage. In that moment, the camera panned to Alicia's determined face, capturing her transformation from betrayed spouse to empowered advocate. Jonathan watched the segment alone, a half-finished bottle of scotch by his side. He saw how the public now regarded Alicia with admiration, a stark contrast to his own vilification. In a moment of clarity, he realized he was witnessing the rise of a woman who had once stood quietly beside him, someone he'd taken for granted. Shattered by regret, he continued drinking until the lights of the penthouse blurred into darkness. While Jonathan sank deeper, Alicia was busy forging a new path. Through Anna Brooks's media connections and her own philanthropic background, she organized a fundraiser for underprivileged schools. The event was set to be a smaller, more authentic affair than the high-gloss galas Jonathan once frequented. The proceeds would go toward bridging the digital divide in low-income neighborhoods, an initiative Alicia had championed long before the scandal. As the date approached, Alicia found herself gaining supporters from unexpected places. Tony McAllister, once interested in partnering with Jonathan, reached out privately. He expressed admiration for Alicia's courage and inquired if she'd accept a donation from his philanthropic foundation. She graciously agreed, grateful for the unwavering backing. Others in the business world, previously enthralled by Jonathan, now saw Alicia as an emerging figure with moral authority. Invitations to speak at leadership panels trickled in ironically, offering her the spotlight once promised to her husband. Meanwhile, Alicia took steps to secure her future. Working with a lawyer, she prepared for a potential divorce filing. She also met with a financial advisor, ensuring she understood the complexities of Jonathan's assets and any marital entitlements. Each step felt daunting, yet liberating, as she realized she no longer had to abide by the illusions of a perfect marriage. In a surprising twist, David Lynn approached Alicia discreetly. He apologized on behalf of Cole Capital, acknowledging that many within the firm admired her. "We know Jonathan's downfall was his own doing," David admitted. "We'd like to work with you in some capacity, maybe an advisory role on the philanthropic side." Alicia hesitated, uncertain about maintaining ties to an institution so entangled with Jonathan's betrayal. Still, she considered the possibility of effecting positive change from within. Days turned into weeks as Alicia balanced philanthropic planning, potential legal battles, and the emotional toll of pregnancy. Through it all, she maintained her composure, fueled by a sense of purpose. While part of her still grieved the betrayal, she also recognized a budding strength. Her identity was no longer solely Mrs. Jonathan Cole. She was Alicia Cole, a force in her own right. One brisk afternoon, as Alicia returned to her parents' bakery for a quiet meeting with donors, she found Jonathan waiting near the doorway, slumped against a lamppost. He appeared disheveled, unshaven eyes bloodshot, wearing a crumpled blazer. The sight startled her, stirring both pity and residual anger. "Please," he said, voice strained. "Just a moment of your time." She considered walking past him, but compassion nudged her to pause. She let him follow her inside, where they settled at a back table amid the comforting aroma of fresh pastries. Lucia glanced over worriedly from the counter, but respected her daughter's privacy. Jonathan exhaled shakily. "I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. I can't lose you too. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me another chance." Alicia felt tears prick her eyes, though she kept her composure. "Another chance to do what? You've lied to me, cheated on me, humiliated me publicly." He pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. "I know. I was an idiot. I was greedy, arrogant. The money, the power, it consumed me. Veronica was just a symptom of my own weaknesses." "That doesn't erase what you did," Alicia murmured. "It doesn't take back the night you were with her while I lay at home, excited to share baby news with you. It doesn't undo all the heartbreak." Jonathan lowered his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. Alicia recognized genuine remorse in his eyes, but she also knew it might be too late. "If you need me to sign anything," he whispered, "custody agreements, child support, I'll do it. I just want to be part of the baby's life." The request struck a chord deep within Alicia. Their child deserved a father, but was Jonathan capable of the responsibility? She wrestled with conflicting emotions, the memory of happier times, and the fresh sting of betrayal. Finally, she said, "I can't make that decision right now. I need time. But this much is clear. You have to deal with the consequences of what you've done on your own." Jonathan nodded, head bowed in defeat. Before leaving, he offered a small envelope, "In case you want to reach me. That's my new number." Then he slipped out into the cold afternoon, a broken man, still clinging to a shred of hope. In the following weeks, Alicia immersed herself in planning her fundraiser, channeling her emotions into a cause that symbolized new beginnings. The event space was modest, a converted art gallery in Brooklyn, yet the atmosphere radiated warmth. Donors included local business owners, educators, and some philanthropic heavyweights. Alicia opened the evening by sharing her own story, not focusing on the scandal, but on the importance of forging a brighter future for the next generation. The fundraiser turned into a soaring success, raising more funds than Alicia had anticipated. Attendees praised her vision, and media coverage highlighted her commitment to positive change, contrasting starkly with Jonathan's tarnished reputation. Standing at the podium, Alicia felt a rush of empowerment. As she thanked the crowd, her hand drifted to her baby bump. She realized that in building a better world for others, she was also building a better world for her child. Not long after Alicia filed for legal separation, citing irreconcilable differences. The move was symbolic as much as legal, a declaration that she was no longer tethered to Jonathan's fate. Public interest in the scandal waned, replaced by fresh headlines as the news cycle moved on. Life was still challenging, but Alicia awoke each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, surrounded by supportive friends and family. As for Jonathan, rumors suggested he had entered therapy and was considering launching a smaller financial consultancy if he could find backers. Some whispered that he was volunteering at a youth center, seeking to rediscover the philanthropic spark that once defined him. Whether these rumors were genuine or just strategic, Alicia didn't know. Occasionally, she thought about letting him be involved with the child, but she needed reassurance that he had truly changed. Alicia's belly grew, and so did her resolve. She had discovered her voice in the midst of betrayal, learning that her worth wasn't measured by a man's success or the illusions they spun together. The conclusion of this saga was not a bitter end, but rather the blossoming of her independence. She carried with her the lessons of heartbreak, the joy of impending motherhood, and a determination to rise above any scandal that dared to overshadow her future. The downfall of Jonathan Cole and the rise of Alicia Cole stand as a testament to life's unpredictable turns. A single leak online dragged a powerhouse billionaire into ruin, yet it also became a spark for his pregnant wife to find her voice, her mission, and her freedom. Betrayal can devastate, but it can also illuminate truths we've long buried. Alicia transformed her heartbreak into a crusade for better opportunities, showing that even in the darkest moments, we have the power to rebuild and sometimes shine brighter than ever before. If this story moved, you don't let it end here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama and compelling narratives. Your support helps us continue bringing stories of resilience, empowerment, and the triumph of the human spirit. Stay tuned for our next riveting tale, because when one door closes, another door swings open, often revealing a whole new world of possibilities. Meanwhile, Alicia Cole, his pregnant wife, began to sense the cracks in her gilded cage. No one, least of all Jonathan, suspected how quickly a single online leak would unravel his carefully manicured world, ending his career in the span of one unforgettable night. Jonathan Cole's story was the stuff of modern legend. Born to middle-class parents in suburban New Jersey, he had clawed his way to a scholarship at Harvard Business School. There he'd rubbed shoulders with future magnates, forging alliances that would later propel him to the top of the finance world. By age 32, Jonathan had founded Cole Capital Ventures, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed real estate assets, buying low, selling high, and weaving magic in between. His good looks and suave charm made him a darling of the business press. Forbes ran a feature titled Young Titan, Jonathan Cole's meteoric rise, capturing him in a tailored navy suit against the panoramic backdrop of New York City. In the interview, he praised mentors such as Warren Buffett for teaching him patience and Bill Gates for demonstrating philanthropy on a global scale. The crowning moment, though, was his picture-shaking hands with Elon Musk after a speculative investment in aerospace startups. Jonathan glowed with the certainty that he was destined for greatness. It was at a fundraiser in Central Park that he first met Alicia Martinez. She was a non-profit consultant with a passion for arts education. Where Jonathan's approach to conversation was slick and polished, Alicia's was empathetic and earnest. He found her refusal to be dazzled by his reputation oddly refreshing. She was there to talk about underfunded public schools, not hedge funds or leveraged buyouts. By the end of that charity walk, Jonathan had her phone number, and she had a curious spark in her heart. In 2 short years, they were married. Alicia's parents, humble owners of a small bakery in Queens, couldn't believe their daughter was wedding a man so frequently mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. But to Alicia, Jonathan wasn't simply the millionaire. He was the person who showed up unannounced to volunteer at her community events, who wrote personal checks for after-school programs. Their wedding ceremony, held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson River, was a glamorous yet heartfelt affair. The tabloids brimmed with gushing coverage, Alicia radiant in lace, Jonathan dashing in a classic tuxedo, smiling as though they had discovered the secret to eternal happiness. At first, their union genuinely seemed magical. Jonathan declared that Alicia grounded him, tethered him to values he might have otherwise forgotten. She brought soul to his ambition. Life in the Cole penthouse sparkled with promise, lavish soirees for global dignitaries, altruistic ventures to build schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, and daily bursts of joy that only 2 people deeply in love could share. If only that bliss could have lasted. Life moved quickly in Jonathan's orbit. The success of Cole Capital Ventures brought new deals, new acquaintances, and inevitably new pressures. Over time, Alicia witnessed the subtle changes in her husband's routine. Invitations from the global elite poured in exclusive dinners with real estate mogul Mark Anderson, lunches at the Plaza with famed venture capitalist Lucy Goldstein, and hush-hush strategy sessions with foreign sovereign funds. While Alicia supported her husband's drive, she couldn't ignore the increasing cracks in his calendar or in his demeanor. He began coming home later, offering vague explanations about urgent meetings or unexpected negotiations. Alicia, ever understanding, reassured him that she respected his hustle. But then came the cancellations of their personal plans. A date to watch an off-Broadway show cancelled. A weekend getaway to the Hamptons postponed. Birthdays and family gatherings became second-tier priorities. The more she tried to reach him, the more she felt a certain emotional distance creeping in. Around the office, Jonathan was surrounded by loyalists and ladder climbers alike. One of them was David Lynn, his longtime friend from Harvard and now partner at Cole Capital. David had witnessed Jonathan's evolution firsthand. He noticed subtle changes too: Jonathan's sharper edge during conference calls, the tension behind his charismatic smile during business pitches. Yet David trusted that a man as resourceful as Jonathan always had it under control. Among the staff at Cole Capital Ventures was also the bright and ambitious Veronica King. A recent Wharton MBA graduate, Veronica had made waves by closing a multi-million-dollar investment in green technology within her first year at the firm. Her intelligence and striking beauty made her a conversation piece at every corporate event. Jonathan lauded her as the future face of finance, praising her for deals that posted triple returns. He found in Veronica a reflection of his younger self, hungry, driven, and fearless. Still, none suspected that an alliance far different than business was about to form. At this point, Alicia had no idea who Veronica King truly was. She saw her name in passing on annual reports. Occasionally, Jonathan would mention Veronica's accomplishments, praising her for innovative thinking. Alicia would nod and smile, impressed by this rising star. In Alicia's mind, she was grateful Jonathan had formidable professionals like Veronica on his team. She never once suspected that the very power he admired in his protégé might be forging a dangerous temptation beneath their polished corporate veneer. As Alicia's pregnancy crept into her second trimester, she began noticing odd details. The first warning sign was a perfume scent she didn't recognize lingering on Jonathan's coat. She asked him about it casually, and he brushed it off, probably from a handshake at some networking event. Another red flag was how he protected his phone like a prized artifact, always face down, always locked with a new passcode. Late at night, she'd hear the faint buzz of messages, see the subtle glow of his screen as he typed back in the dark. Each time, she tried to rationalize away her concerns. This was the man she loved, who donated millions to build libraries in underserved communities, who cried at the birth announcement, who once surprised her on a random Tuesday with her favorite pastries from her parents' bakery. Infidelity seemed unimaginable. Yet Alicia's heart churned with a subtle, gnawing dread. Life in the Cole penthouse had become increasingly solitary. Although Jonathan had promised to limit business travel during her pregnancy, his schedule remained as frenetic as ever. Singapore, Dubai, Paris. He was always on the go, chasing new mergers or expansions. He rarely spent more than a couple of nights at home. When he did, he was restless, glued to emails or brainstorming calls. Alicia began to feel that the only presence she could truly count on was the baby she carried. Friends from Alicia's old neighborhood in Queens reached out with concern. They missed her visits the way she used to pop in for coffee and conversation. He's just going through a busy phase, she'd reassure them. In a way, Alicia was trying to reassure herself too. Still, doubt grew every time she caught sight of that mysterious perfume, or saw a new bruise-like shadow under her husband's eyes from sleepless nights. Then Alicia found something chilling, a hotel receipt tucked in Jonathan's suitcase from a high-end resort in Turks and Caicos. The date overlapped with a weekend he'd told her he was in Boston, closing a deal. She tried to confront him, but lost her nerve. Could she have misunderstood? Was it a courtesy booking for a client or staff? Her mind ran in circles, seeking a plausible explanation. Little did she know the truth was far more insidious. Veronica King was not the sort of woman who blended into the background. With ebony hair styled in a sleek bob, she carried herself with confident ease. By day, She dazzled boardrooms with crisp financial analyses, commanding respect from colleagues twice her age. By night, she appeared in social columns alongside Manhattan's elite, her emerald dress shimmering under paparazzi flashes. She was rumored to have grown up in modest circumstances, determined to break ceilings, no matter the cost. One evening, Alicia found herself accompanying Jonathan to a charity gala, hosted by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Proceeds would benefit underfunded art programs in public schools, an event that aligned perfectly with Alicia's passion. Upon arriving, Alicia felt the old sparkle of excitement hobnobbing with notable figures like gallery owners, educators, and philanthropic entrepreneurs. A group of Jonathan's colleagues from Cole Capital Ventures greeted them, among whom was Veronica. This was their first real introduction. "Ah, the legend herself," Veronica said, with a radiant smile, extending her hand to Alicia. "Jonathan speaks so highly of you, and all the wonderful work you do with school kids." Alicia returned the greeting, struck by Veronica's grace. She was everything Alicia imagined a high-flying finance star, to be polished, assertive, exuding an air of subtle power. When Alicia mentioned her involvement in drafting new arts curricula, Veronica listened attentively, nodding as though she truly cared. The conversation was pleasant, even warm. Yet Alicia caught a flicker of something unspoken between Veronica and Jonathan, a shared glance that felt too intimate, too layered with private meaning. Throughout the gala, Alicia couldn't shake the sense that eyes were on them, as if the rest of the guests sensed an undercurrent. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was just hormonal and overthinking, but a tiny voice inside her whispered, "Veronica King is more important to Jonathan than you realize." By the evening's end, Alicia felt unsettled. Jonathan excused himself to take a call, just when Alicia was beginning to share her feelings about an educational campaign. Veronica also vanished into the throng of socialites. Alicia sipped her sparkling water in awkward solitude, noticing a faint swirl of that same unfamiliar perfume drifting through the air. After the gala, Alicia began piecing together subtle patterns. Jonathan had singled Veronica out in so many conversations, praising her as a strategic genius, marveling at her ability to close deals in weeks that took others months. In the past, Alicia had been proud whenever Jonathan mentored bright up-and-comers. Yet with Veronica, the tone of his praise sounded tinged with personal adoration. One morning, Alicia found herself with a free schedule and decided to surprise Jonathan at his office with homemade pastries, his favorite almond croissants from her parents' bakery. It was a gesture she used to do often, back when everything felt normal. Arriving unannounced, Alicia was greeted by the wide-eyed receptionist, who stumbled through a hello, as though not entirely sure how to handle her presence. She brushed it off and headed down the glass-walled corridor to Jonathan's corner office. Outside his door, Alicia froze. Through the partial opening, she heard lowered voices. Jonathan and Veronica seemed to be in the middle of a heated discussion, but not in an angry sense, more like an emotionally charged conversation. Alicia didn't want to eavesdrop, yet she couldn't will herself to move. Then she clearly heard Veronica say, "We'll figure this out, Jonathan. I'm not giving up on you." A brief silence followed, and then Jonathan's voice, softer. "I know. Just not here." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest. She quickly retraced her steps and waited by the reception area, forcing a casual expression when Veronica exited the office moments later. Veronica paused in surprise upon seeing Alicia with the pastry box. "Oh, hi. I didn't know you'd be stopping by." Her voice carried an undercurrent of tension, though her face remained impeccably calm. Alicia's fingers clenched around the box, as she managed a tight smile. Their brief exchange ended with Veronica slipping away in a swirl of designer perfume. Alicia approached Jonathan's office next. He greeted her with mild surprise and a forced grin. "Almond croissants, wow," he said, accepting the box. His eyes flicked to the door, as if confirming Veronica was gone. Alicia asked if he was all right, and Jonathan dismissed it as office stress. The entire moment felt like a carefully choreographed dance, with unspoken tensions swirling around them. That night, Alicia hardly slept, twisting the memory of Veronica's words over and over in her mind. "I'm not giving up on you." She remembered how intimate they sounded, like a promise between lovers rather than colleagues. Uncertainty blossomed, overshadowing even the joys of her pregnancy. She told herself she needed proof before leaping to conclusions that might destroy her marriage. Still, the seeds of suspicion had taken root, and the soil of her heart felt unbearably cold. Despite mounting worries, Alicia maintained her public smile as she accompanied Jonathan to another high-profile event, the annual City of Tomorrow Gala. Headlined by luminaries in real estate, tech, and philanthropy, it was a can't-miss affair for anyone jockeying for influence. Jonathan was especially eager to network with Tony McAllister, a legendary investor rumored to be launching a multi-billion-dollar fund. Alicia planned to share her vision for an educational project that integrated cutting-edge technology into underfunded schools, hoping to drum up philanthropic support. The venue was lavish, a 5-star hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and violin music mingled with the hum of high-stakes conversation. Alicia wore a flowing cobalt gown, tailored to accommodate her growing baby bump. She felt both regal and uneasy, noting the stares from various acquaintances. She wondered if she was imagining the undertones of gossip in their voices when they greeted her. About an hour into the gala, Veronica King swept in, wearing a sequined emerald dress that seemed to catch every flicker of light. She joined Jonathan, who stood near a champagne fountain, exchanging pleasantries with Tony McAllister. Veronica's arrival sparked a shift in the air. Jonathan's posture straightened, and there was a palpable current of electricity as they spoke. Alicia approached, heart thudding. She joined the circle just in time to hear Jonathan praising Veronica. "She single-handedly brought in an Indonesian sovereign fund for our latest project. Imagine what she'll do next year." Veronica laughed softly, thanking him, while shooting a quick, coded look in his direction. That fleeting glance felt like a secret confession. Tony McAllister then turned to Alicia, politely inquiring about her philanthropic interests. Seizing the opportunity, she shared her concept for bridging education gaps through advanced technology. Though Tony listened, Alicia sensed a general distraction in the group, as if her words were overshadowed by the silent drama